Okay. Good afternoon, viewers, and if you're joining us for this episode of the Can You Beat Nigeria Challenge. This week, we're talking about, this is week 10 of the challenge. This week, we're going to be talking about the power sector. Power sector is one thing that's really affected Nigeria, and I know a lot of people who have watched the early episodes have asked, when are you going to do one on the power sector? So today, we're talking about the power sector. And I think it's going to be something that I think will interest quite a few people. One second. I think I'm getting a bit of an echo, so please 1 second. All right, so it's, yes, thank you. So that echo is gone. Essentially, so today I have with me three very senior consultants and people who are familiar with this industry. Previously, you've met Mr. Elliot Umole, who is a senior manager at Exxon Nigeria, very knowledgeable in the power sector and energy sector. My other guest today is Mr. Victor Iringe-Koko from Total, also a very knowledgeable person in this sector, in power, oil and gas sector. Mr. Ikus Masah is my third panelist today, and is a consultant in the power sector as well. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the discussion this afternoon. Thank you. I think you're all muted.
Thank you.
So we can, yes, we're ready to start. You can unmute your phones so that you can respond whenever you're ready. Gentlemen, I'm going to start with the issue of the key issue that we're facing, at least in my view, on the power sector in Nigeria. And this is not a new issue. It's been going on from God knows when. I remember reading books as far back as in the late 50s and 60s, when we had ECN, even before we had NEPA, that we were already having power challenges. I was doing a quick read up the other day, and they're saying that Nigeria has one of the lowest power consumption per capita in the world. As an example, if you look at somewhere like South Africa has maybe 4 megawatt per capita, 4 megawatt hour per capita. Do you understand? In South Africa. Ghana, as small as Ghana may be comparatively, they have 0.3 megawatt per hour. Nigeria has one of the lowest in Africa, which is surprising. We have only 0.15 megawatt per hour consumption, which means that South Africa, per capita, South Africa is consuming 300 times more than what we are consuming. Now, I don't know what this problem is, what's driving this problem. I don't know whether it's a network problem, is a technical issue, is a cultural issue, is a monetary issue, is a policy issue. It's not clear to me. So the first thing I wanted to throw to you gentlemen today is to find out, in your own assessment, what is the core of the power problem that we have in Nigeria? Is it technical? Is it commercial? Is it cultural? Mr. Elliot, if you wanted to start, please.
Thank you, Kunle. If I would be starting and I want to take or diagnose this problem, the way I would look at it is ask myself, what's the equation to power? What's the demand and the supply side? What drives the demand and the supply side to power? What's the incentive for anyone to supply anything? Because at the end, power, like every other commodity, requires a market. So does Nigeria have a market for power? Mm-hmm. And once there's a market, is there an incentive for someone like an entrepreneur to come to that market and create value for the people who want power? I think those are the fundamental questions. Mm-hmm. If you think about it and you go from the data you've shared in terms of per capita consumed, because there's per capita consumed and there's per capita generated. So you need to figure out where your problem is. If it's consumption, what's driving the low per capita consumed? Is it because we are generating excess and we don't have the purchasing power to pay? Or we're just generating very little and we have purchasing power to pay, in which case price is high. But I think fundamentally, you need to write down the economic equation. And I think everything breaks down at that point where you say, this is the supply side and this is the demand side. This is where the wedge or meet. And these are the issues we're dealing with.
It's a good point, and I'm going to challenge you on that. I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes because I did a quick look up on some of these things, and I will come to you on a question on that shortly. But Mr. Victor, how do you see the problem itself? How do you see our power problem? What is at the core of our power problem from your point of view?
Hey, hi. In my own opinion, it's quite complicated. Yes, in terms of per capita, we are amongst the lowest in the world. But you see that statistic is based purely on the power that is fed into the grid.
Okay.
But it is common sense that Nigeria's economy is powered by generators. We don't really have the statistics of the amount of power that is generated by all these off-grid installations. So it may not be as bad as it is, but our situation is not good.
Our situation is not good.
Yeah. So as Elliot said, you have a market for power? Personally, I would say yes, we have the market for power to drive the Nigerian economy. And some of the goods and services that are currently being produced are produced at a high cost because most people run their businesses on generators. So the demand is actually, but there are many things that are not right. Okay, in 2005, the power reform bill was passed into law and signed into law. It led to the unbundling of the power sector. The government broke down into the power sector. You had generating companies and 11 regional distribution companies and the TCN, the Transmission Company of Nigeria. So the TCN runs the grid. Distributors distribute power to the consumers in the different regions. So which is a good thing, as in we had some level, the government had some responsibilities. They were supposed to build out the infrastructure, improve the transmission network, improve the distribution network, but that was not done. Maybe because of lack of funds or lack of the political will or whatever, that was not done. So it has led to a huge gap that needs to be
addressed. Okay, so we will unbundle some of this today. Thank you, Victor. Thank you very much. Okay, we will unbundle this. We will come back and go into those level of details like you've said. Victor, I think you're muted. I think you're muted, Victor. Yes. Okay, good. Mr. Masah, please go ahead. What, in your opinion, is the big issue with our power sector?
For me, I think the big issue with the power sector is multifaceted. We cannot pin it down to a single item. So for the power sector, we don't have enough capacity.
Okay.
We don't have enough capacity. So consequently, our per capita consumption is very low. It's one of the lowest in the world. And because of that, we've been making effort to try to expand the capacity. Our installed generation capacity is about 12,000 megawatts.
Correct.
In the last 3-4 years. In trying to expand that capacity, it will require a whole lot of investments, which we do not have, and we'll need external kind of investment from our side to help us achieve that goal. But in trying to get external finance to expand our generation, distribution, and transmission capacity, we have to recognize that our electricity tariff is not competitive. So on one hand, your tariff is not competitive. It does not give an investor the right incentive to come to your environment to invest. On the other hand, you try to expand your capacity. So in between the two, you are caught in between satisfying the general populace who wants a low tariff because of the way the economy is. And on the other hand, you're trying to expand your capacity to meet the demand of the people. Presently, we do averagely about 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts generation per day, and we have a lot of losses in the system. So consequently, one gets to the people is about 3,000 megawatts. Meanwhile, our peak demand every day is about 16,000 megawatts. So that leaves a whole lot of gap in the system. And that also presents an investment opportunity for people who want to come in. But for anybody to invest in this sector, the person has to ensure or has to be convinced that you'll be able to recoup its investment. And the only way you can be convinced that you can recoup your investment if you see that the price in the industry is competitive. That means the pricing is based on market forces. That means the tariff is based on executing your cost profile, how much you put in, how much you get, not because of what government wants to place as a cap for the tariff.
As a cap.
So across all that, there are multiple problems. There are political problems.
No, Mr. Ikus, I agree with you, and thank you for that very good summary there, quickly. Yeah, because for me, there you have raised about 3 or 4 issues. Okay, so you raised the issue of capacity, of the installed capacity. Okay, that's one. You raised the issue of cost of pricing, which is two. You raised the issue of transmission, how much we are able to get through the grid.
Yeah.
I actually agree with you because those are some of the questions I wanted to ask you gentlemen today. So let's step back and begin to unpack those one by one. Okay, I'm going to yeah. So you mentioned, for example, that our installed capacity we have about 12 gigawatt. Yeah?
Yeah.
But you also mentioned that our peak demand is about six gig. Correct?
16,000.
Yeah, so, I mean, the peak demand is about 16,000, but what we're able to get through the network is only about 6. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I agree with you because when I also recently I read, I think it was Mr. Victor, one of the gentlemen, who shared with me the Siemens report, this program that Siemens is doing for Nigeria. And those numbers that you have given us actually line up with that. But my question is that if we're able to generate 12, our peak demand is 16, but what our grid can only take is about 6. It suggests to me that, okay, yes, we have some capacity issues, fine, but the capacity is not the immediate problem. It seems that transmission is the immediate problem. What do you think? For example, if we can generate 12 giga and we can transmit that 12 giga, our lives will be a lot better. What are your thoughts on that? I'll come to Mr. Victor and to Mr. Elliot on that, but please give us your thoughts first.
Okay, yeah, you're very correct. Our transmission capacity is quite low. Even with the installed capacity of 12,000 megawatts, if peradventure we are able to recover all those stranded capacity and we are able to achieve available capacity of 10,000 to 10,000, it still will be more than what the grid can handle. So therefore, the grid needs expansion. And if the grid needs expansion, we expect that the generation capacity has to expand at the same pace with the grid capacity. So, so we expect that for generation, transmission, and distribution, there will be a kind of synchronization in their planning in what they want to achieve. We're not going to have a distribution network that is like, let's say 12,000 megawatt capacity, for example, and then you have a transmission network that is about 8,000, the generation capacity is about 6,000. So there's going to be a mismatch. And in that mismatch, it's going to cost a lot of money because if you are increasing capacity, it's going to cost a lot of money. And when you are increasing, you are expecting a return from what you are going to carry through that your network. And if that capacity is not being utilized, if it is underutilized, you're losing money. So there has to be proper planning from generation to transmission to distribution. So I expect that they will be doing a kind of synchronized analysis of the network
Of the network. Okay.
where we
Thank
are,
you. Thank you
what
very
our
much.
challenges are, where we want to be.
And where we want to be. Mr. Elliot, what are your thoughts on that? How do you think we can synchronize this? How can we address this issue? If we have 12 gig in install capacity, but we can only transmit 5 or 6, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll go back, and I agree totally with what Mr. Ikus or Mr. Masah said. But I'll go back to my fundamental framework, which makes it easy. I have a need, and how do I fund or meet that need? Goes to installed capacity. So what we've done in the past, like Mr. Masah said, is we never took an end-to-end view. We never understood that until power is consumed, I've not provided service. So if I talk about installed capacity, it in itself is nothing until it gets to the end user. So if I take an end-to-end approach and I decide that I'm going 10% improvement in the generation, and I ask myself, can I take it to the far end, which is consumer buying 10%? Until I do that, I've done nothing. I've just invested in something. I only pre-invested, and it's not creating value for me. Okay. So there should be the value approach, which is, am I creating value? Who are my stakeholder? Who is my user? Right? Who is my customer, and what am I giving to my customer? That way I can fund, because I think our problem is really funding. We know what to do. We know the developmental project that we want to take, or the challenge we have. We want to expand capacity across all the value chain, from generation through to transmission or distribution. That's what we want to do. But for me to do that, it will cost me something. There's a cost, and I will create a certain benefit to the market. There's an incentive for it today, because we can see people, the pinch point is there. But the question really is, where is the dollar going to come from? Is it a developmental dollar from government, where it will come from the physical or monetary, physical policies of government as revenue into an investment for them? Or I want something accelerated from third-party finance. And in that way, and that's what Mr. Ikus was saying, there should be proper pricing for it. The technical problem can be sorted. Because I can buy technology, I can buy science. But the challenging one is, are people ready to pay? Do I have framework for payment? Is government out of the way?
I agree with you. I see your point. Mr. Victor, let me come to Mr. Victor then. Thank you very much, Mr. Elliot. Mr. Victor, so what I'm hearing from Mr. Ikus and Mr. Elliot now is that, okay, yes, okay, we have constraints. They're saying to me, what I'm hearing is that, okay, we have the install capacity. Yes, there's a technical problem with the transmission, but it comes down to pricing. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think the problem is really in the transmission, and do we have a pricing issue? Please go ahead, Mr. Victor.
Okay, so I agree with what both previous speakers have said. It's actually a no-brainer that you have installed generating capacity of 12 gigawatts and your transmission system can only support 6. And even that 6 is not really reality.
It's not, yeah.
If you look at recent statistics, you're looking at maybe 4,600. You know, that's what was produced, you know, last 3 months, for example. So do we really have 6,000 gigawatts capacity on the transmission? We don't really know. Then the second point that Elliot was raising is about the consumers themselves. You know, recently, the distribution companies were rejecting power generated. They couldn't actually collect the power because they could not sell that power.
What?
Yes, it's an issue. It sounds funny, but it is true. We have a huge population of people that cannot really afford to take this power. And you have those people that really need the power, but the power doesn't get to them because, you know, we're talking about generation, transmission, but even on the distribution network, we have infrastructural challenges which have not been addressed. And this is what this this Siemens deal is supposed to address. It's supposed to make some investments, build some new infrastructure, even on the distribution side. So that is that. Then this installed capacity that we claim to have, how realistic is it? These generators, are they properly being maintained? I've looked at the financial statements of some of these generator companies. They're actually running at a loss, most of them. Now, the feed-in tariff for the generators or the GenCos has been fixed at 26 naira since 2020. No adjustment for currency fluctuation. It has been fixed like that. So the generating companies are not really making that much money. The only way they survive is they go back to the government. The government will pay them back to cover some of their expenses, but they are not running today as proper businesses. So it brings us back to what I mentioned, that we have an issue with pricing. And on that pricing regime, recently, the government came up with a new structure where they categorized different kinds of customers. So you have the category A to E, where you get guaranteed service hours, you know, for specific kind of customer. So for example, the band A, you're guaranteed 20 hours per day. Band B, you're guaranteed 16. Band C, you're guaranteed 12. Band D, you're guaranteed 8. And band E, you're guaranteed 4 hours of electricity per day. And based on that, you pay a different rate. So the band A pays premium and the band E pays, So this is what the government has tried to do, because they've seen that this might make the distribution companies, you know, sit up, because previously what they were doing, they refused to issue these prepaid meters. They were relying on the old meters where they can do estimated billing. So on a month, when financials, they say, okay, X amount of money. So they just share the bill to all their customers that don't have meters. But now that would not really work again. They call it the multi-year tariff order. You can find it on the NEI. Where my mom is living is categorized as E, but when she sent me her bill, her category was D. Okay, maybe the difference is not so. She billed for D, but she hardly gets 4 hours of electricity.
Of power.
Her category was D. Okay, maybe the difference is so. Yeah.
Thank you very
so
much.
These are the issues, and you now have an situation where. But yeah, so these are the issues. And, you know, to address that other issue of consumption, the NEI, the issue of means the amount of power that is given to it determines the particular region, and it is fixed. So if you hit your limit, you won't, because the restrictions in the system.
I see. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Victor. Thank you. Now, but then, okay, so now as we were making this discussion, one or two things that has come from all three of you, you've referred to this Siemens issue. I think I'm still having problems with Mr. Victor. Yeah, okay. So now basically all three gentlemen, you've referred to this Siemens issue. And all of us have also heard it also in the names, okay? Now, I like Mr. Victor just said, one key issue is that even if we had solved the installation and the transmission side, our distribution side is also very bad. transformers, bus bars are not up to date. When I read that Siemens report, the technical report, I recently read that Siemens technical report myself, and I see that they did a quick assessment across the country. They prepared all the single line diagrams, okay? And what you can see is that they're saying that the biggest issues they're going to have is around in the south, around Port Harcourt, around the 132 subsystem in Port Harcourt. And one of the things that they were recommending in that report was to replace the entire feeder in that area. Do you understand? Now, so I know that also on the distribution side that we have issues. But like you gentlemen are all saying to us, this is going to cost us some significant amount of money. I remember, let me say something. A few years ago, Victor, you did an analysis. I remember you did some analysis when about 2017, and you were suggesting that the minimum amount it would take us to deliver power to each house was around 44 naira. I think that was in 2017. You did the analysis. Now, if I recall correctly, I think we're still charging about 11 naira per kilowatt hour. Do you understand? How much are we charging now? I believe it's around 11 naira. So there seems to be...
It's much more now.
It's much more now. How much are we charging now?
Yeah, so effective 1st of September of this year, we now have this new tariff in place. So I'll just give you a quick rundown.
Okay.
So for eco distribution, you have the following rates. Okay, so for the band A is 56.98.
Okay.
Band B is 52.8. Band C is 52.69. Band D is 47, and band E is 39. Now, you know that when this was announced, the unions came and they threatened to go on strike. So the government and the unions negotiated that they should delay the implementation for band D and E until I think February of next year. So they would still remain on the old rates
until that time.
For that band. But for band A, B, and C, it's already in force. So people are actually paying more.
Paying more now. Fantastic. That's good news, at least because I noticed that part of the problem before it went to 11 naira, I remember it was 3 naira actually, and then it went to 11 naira. And at the time when it was 11 naira, it was costing us 40, about per calculations that you had done, and I've seen those calculations at that time, it was costing us about 44 naira. So, there seems to be a funding thing. But now that this regulation is in place now, do we sense that investors are likely to come? I mean, we're talking about the Siemens. We know the Siemens thing is there. What do you guys think? Elliot, what is your experience? I remember many years ago when we worked for oil and gas companies in Nigeria, there was a requirement for oil and gas companies to have IPP. And the only reason that did not fly was because government was imposing the pricing at that time. And that pricing was not working for them. Now that it looks like we have a new structure, is that likely to change? What are your thoughts?
So these are my personal thoughts. I think it will change in the short run, but in the long run, it won't change much. So in the short run, yeah, there may be there is incentive for people to invest. But in the long run, what you need is the sanctity of agreements, the sanctity of regulation. Let regulations come from unbiased arbiters, get government out of the way to a large extent.
Okay.
If, like Victor said, if government raises tariff and government go negotiates with labor tomorrow and delay takeoff, if you're the one giving me fund or you are the investor, what would that do to your cash flow?
It messes you up. Okay, I see.
So I think from the way I see it, in the short run, there's enough there for folks to come in. But government will do more. Government will do more in terms of signing PPPs. I think that's where they should go, like the Siemens agreement. Get long-term finances from developmental bank. Go invest in those infrastructures. Some of them are critical. The transmission and the rest of it, some of it are critical. You define those for the poorest of the poor in your society as critical infrastructure and protect those. Now you would, like you've categorized the markets, there's certain markets that is juicy. Those are private sector led markets.
Okay.
Charge them the right tariff that protects the poorest of the poor.
The poorest people. I see. I see.
You know, they have to do something. But to answer your question, it's a good start, but they need a long run solution.
They need a lot more. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Elliot. Now I'll come to two questions that you gentlemen raised earlier. The issue of the metering, and I'm going to go to Mr. Masah for this one. You know, Mr. Victor mentioned it. I think Elliot also mentioned it. There's this problem, consistent problem with supplying meters. Do you understand? And it's been there for a few years. Okay. Now, the other day I was reading on the net, right? I saw that NERC in Nigeria already has a specification for what they expect for the smart meters to be in Nigeria. They have that specification. So my question is, if there's a specification, all that is left is fabrication and installation. If we're having so much problem with metering, why is it impossible for us? We have 200 universities, we have manufacturing. Why is it impossible for us to create meters ourselves in Nigeria? Please, can somebody help me out with this? Masah, please go ahead.
Okay, so for me, I think most of the solutions they are trying to implement in the power sector, they are trying to solve different aspects of the problem in isolation. So if you're solving one problem in isolation, it might not necessarily translate into achieving your goal from the next point of view. So for example, if you are looking at tariff in isolation, he was talking about poorest of the poor, protecting them and all that. So we observe that anytime there is an announcement for increase in tariff, there's always a lot of protests and and then government backs down. But it will interest you to know that this same poorest of the poor, they spend a whole lot more on electricity.
Generator.
For example, in the rural electrification, projects that have been launched, the solar power renewable project, the tariff there is as high as 120 naira per kilowatt hour. And those projects are being implemented for the poorest of the poor, and they are paying between 100 to 120 naira per kilowatt hour. Now, down to the city, where we have urban people, upwardly mobile, working class people, and here we are in the city, we are saying to pay 30 naira, 40 naira is very expensive because it will affect the poorest of the poor. Meanwhile, the poorest of the poor in the rural area, they're already paying over 4 times what they are paying in the city. For me, it's all transparency, the whole process. Trust and trust.
So Mr. Masah, you're breaking up. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
And that definition has to be very, very transparent and clear. If you can define it from generation to transmission to distribution, cost of finance, and all of that, and we arrive at a figure and we say, for us to be competitive, for these services to be available, for us to attract investors to give us the kind of expansion that we need, this is how much we think we should be charging for per kilowatt hour. That to be fair enough. If any other opinion to say, oh, this is too expensive because it's going to affect this and this, it is not supposed to be a luxury. It's supposed to be on a need basis. If you need it, you use the one you need and not waste. For example, if you take all those small SMEs like the barbing salon, the hairdressers, the tailors that use those small petrol generators, those 0.7.
I passed my neighbor, yes.
Yeah. You'll be surprised on a monthly basis, this over 15 to 12,000 on Twitter. And the generation will be able to take on their refrigerators or their ACs or their pressing irons and things like that. Current amount for grid supply that will be able to carry all their appliances because it's from the grid or in their view from government, they will say it is too expensive. So I think from the consumer side, there's that perception of entitlement, and from the operators, regulators, government side, there's that fear of not annoying the populace
Hmm.
for some reasons. You know. So if we're able to marry these two requirements, how do you effectively determine the price of these products and market to the people? Now, coming to the prepaid meters, if everybody is to have a meter, you have to give the operators a way to maneuver as they've been doing. So, for example, if what they will to them, let's say for a cold disco, for example, for a co and Ikeja disco, for example, will over 900 megawatts to them on a daily basis. Now, if that 900 megawatts, they lose about 30% to 80% and still losses, and then to collection losses. If they give prepaid meters to people, you understand, they might not be able to recover their costs. You understand? So there's a whole lot of undercurrents around the prepaid meters. It's not about being able to produce it or being able to acquire it. It's a systemic thing that needs to be addressed. That's why I said we need to address the whole system from end to end, from generation to distribution. If we address all the problems and we say, okay, this is what gives, and everybody agrees with that, I think we're going to have a whole lot of solutions than we have now.
Thank you very much, Ikus. But Victor, please respond to what Ikus is saying here, because what I'm hearing from Mr. Ikus here now is that it's not that these guys cannot give us meters. They're deliberately not giving us meters because they want to be able to recover their money. Is this correct?
Yeah, it's correct. I mentioned it before because the fact that we don't have prepaid meters gives them that leeway to do estimated
10 billion. Oh.
billing. So that's why the NERC put a cap on what they can do by estimated billing. In fact, for me, even this prepaid meter thing is it's even too much. Even if we have the old analog meters,
Correct.
you can still do your metering. Okay, maybe they cannot come to come and read your meter. But today now with your mobile phone, you can take a picture of your meter and you go to the office and say, okay, this is my current reading. Let me pay for what I have used, you know, that kind of thing. So it's not the only, the system losses are actually too high. And it's a combination of many factors. In fact, someone was suggesting once that the way our distribution network is leads us to have too many losses. I will explain why. So you see, if you have an 11 kVA coming into a transformer, that transformer maybe is a 500 kVA transformer, is feeding, I don't know, 100 or 150 homes, okay?
Yeah.
Now, you're now distributing power at 415 volts if you're using 3-phase or maybe 220 volts.
Correct, 415, yeah.
The distance from the transformer is actually quite long, yeah? Distance from the transformer can be up to 100 meters or more. And you have a voltage drop is normal. Once you're transmitting electricity through a cable, you have a voltage drop. So that voltage drop is actually a loss. Some people have actually suggested that we should create another level of distribution, like 6,000 volts distribution instead of 11. So you distribute at a higher voltage where you can use thinner cables and you will now have individual transformers, you know, maybe one small transformer servicing maybe 2 houses or something, just like you have in America. You see their transformers are on their electrodes. It looks like a bucket.
Correct.
Yeah, so something like that. It cuts out of losses, you know, on the system. That's one suggestion. But what Mr. Ikus mentioned is actually very critical. We really need to ask these unions whose interests
are they
really
protecting? I see.
Yes, because if you say you're fighting for the poorest of the poor and somebody in the rural area is paying 120 naira per, is not right. You know, some of all these government programs are avenues for some people to make a quick buck.
I see.
We could actually have a holistic solution where power is distributed to everybody and you have to pay. For today, the only thing we have in our system is we reserve 50 kilowatts at 4 naira per kilowatt for the poorest of the poor. I don't know who actually benefits from that.
Benefits from that.
I don't know how realistic.
I see.
Yeah. Because 50 kilowatts is actually very small.
Very small.
It's a very small amount of power. For me, I think we should increase it and also increase the tariff. 4 naira for me is unrealistic.
It's unrealistic.
So maybe make it something like 300 kilowatts, yeah? And it should be available to everybody. So you say the first, every month, your first 300 kilowatts is at X amount, then anything on top of that, pay premium. You know, it would, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
But this metering thing, is all BS. Okay, whether we are manufacturing meters in Nigeria, meters are available. If you want a meter today, you can buy a meter for 60,000. All these private estates all around, they all install
have
meters. And it's exactly the same meter that the distribution companies are using. There's nothing different, but they deliberately don't want to issue because they have the option of estimated bill to cover their losses.
Billing. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Now, let me switch it because I'm also cognizant of time. Let me switch the discussion to something slightly different. And I'm going to come to you, Mr. Elliot. Yeah. Okay. So now I see that it looks like in terms of the next big investment that we're going to have. Now there's this Siemens thing which is going on. Yeah. And I think Nigeria is putting about $6 billion on that. Yeah. With Siemens. Okay. But the next big thing which is going on in parallel is the Mambila Plateau, is the Mambila project, the hydro project which is in Gongola. And that project is supposed to add another 3 giga into our system. Okay. Now, my question then is this, Elliot, if you are Minister for Power, is that the, and please, I'm not criticizing the government because I think this government, in fairness, they are doing a lot. At least the Siemens we can see. I'm not criticizing anybody. The Mambila is something else which has been on the back burner since 1982. So that somebody is picking it up is something to be, do you understand, to be proud about. But my only question is that where we should be, knowing what we now know from this discussion today, is that where we should be putting our money? There's another 3 or 4 billion which is going to go into that project. Is that what we should be prioritizing now, or should we be looking at this network and the back end of the distribution? Mr. Elliot, please.
So if I was the government, I think for government, first, where I will prioritize is putting in place a market-driven framework. That's the first thing I would do if I put money there anyway. Okay. Because from everything we've talked about, every speaker on this call, it's pretty obvious. Until I can pay, I do nothing.
You have nothing.
Now, once that market-driven framework is there, where people can recover their costs, then as a government, I will prioritize on the most critical end of the value chain and go after that.
Okay.
But it's a decision that will be driven by numbers, really, economic numbers, because they'll be driven by value and they'll be driven by numbers. But having said that, if I have 12 gig and I can only, what gets to the final consumer is 3.5, then it's only commonsensical that I shouldn't be building additional grid.
First, yeah.
Do you understand? I should go to the end and try to debottleneck. In my word, it's just debottleneck the entire system so that everything I have stranded can get to the end user today. And once that's done, because the 6 billion for Siemens, somebody is writing a check for it. There is guarantee behind it. So it's still government that is spending that. It's not free.
It's not free.
3 billion. It's still government. So it's a total of 9 billion at the end. The question we need to ask ourselves, is the 9 billion creating immediate value? Or is deferred value for 20 years time? Right. And so if I were in government today, I would do 1, 2, 3 things. The first is framework. Second, drive transparency into the system to build trust. Third is prioritize on where I'll create the quickest value to my end user, my customers, and populace.
Thank you very much, Elliot. And I'm going to come to you, Mr. Masah, then to Mr. Victor. But thank you very much for that input, Victor, Elliot. But I think you are right, because when I read that Siemens report, in fairness to the government, what you will see is that they are saying that they're going to do this Siemens now in 3 phases. Okay. So their first thing is that they're going to do quick wins, which will take us to 7 gig. Then they will do a debottlenecking in phase 2, which will take us to 11 gig on the grid. And then phase 3 will take them to 25 giga. Do you understand? In terms of the install capacity. So the first 2 phases will face the distribution side, whereas the last phase, which is the 25 gig, is the one where they will be adding additional gigawatt. The only thing that worries me is that anyway, we're going into the Mambila. The Mambila, I understand the plan is to deliver Mambila by 2030. So there's a lot of work which is going on in the background, and obviously we are grateful as a country for that. One major takeaway I've taken from this so far is the fact that we need to match demand and supply, and our pricing needs to be right. Mr. Masah, let me come to you. I'm beginning to round up, but let me come to you. The Gencos and the Discos, how have they work? With retrospect, now we've run that for about 10 years. How do you score our Discos and our Gencos?
For the Discos and Gencos, they tried in their own right.
Yeah.
And just like the consumers are plagued with a lot of challenges, the Gencos and Discos, they also with their own set of challenges. I must appreciate them. For the Gencos, for example, they've signed up gas uptake, right?
Okay.
Take or pay, take or pay. So if you take, you pay. If you don't take, you pay. So that comes at a cost to them. So if they're generating, from the other end of the value chain, somebody is saying you need to shut down because of transmission problem or because the discos are not uptaking what you're generating, they will shut down. If they shut down, that means they're not going to be taking gas for that period, and they're going to pay for that gas they're not taking. And in shutting down their system, is going to reduce their maintenance turnaround time. What it means is that they spend a whole lot of money in doing short run maintenance than would have spent if the systems were running without any stoppage. You understand? So for me, I think they have their own challenges. They have been working well to the best of their capacity. And for the discos as well, I think the problem with the discos started from when they acquired those assets. A lot of people have been saying, oh, they just acquired the asset because they're thinking it's going to be business as usual. They want to be collecting money from the public. But I don't necessarily see it like that. I think there was a kind of, what I call it, not very good due diligence when they were acquiring
Correct.
the asset. Because what they were expecting as the losses in the system was far higher than what it
Higher.
was when
I
they
see.
started.
I
So
see.
that already was going to impact on their financials. And
Hmm.
if that was going to be the case, that means they were already on a bad footing. It was
Hmm.
going to affect the bottom line, it was going to affect everything they do. And being businessmen, they had to survive one way or the other. So along the line, because of what we're not getting from what they expected from the system, as in revenue generation, consequently, they found it very difficult to service their loans. You
Hmm.
understand? And of course, they will now be in the bad books of the banks, becomes difficult for them to get finance, cost of finance becomes expensive, and all that will also impact on their ability to also upgrade and expand their network. If they are
Hmm.
not able to upgrade and expand their network, the losses will continue. They will
Hmm.
not be able to cover a lot of customers, and of course, it will also impact on their revenue generation. So they are also caught up in the same system as we are caught up in the
As we are
system.
caught up.
And being a profit generating company, they need to make profit. They need to return money to their shareholders. They need to stay alive. And so everybody is just in the system trying to stay alive, and nobody is addressing the system from end to end to know what exactly the problem is and how we are going to solve it. We're just apportioning blame. Oh, it's generation. Oh, it's transmission. Oh, it's this group. Everybody has his own fair of challenge in the system. Until we sit together and work together and analyze the problem, provide solutions, we will not be able to get the kind of coherent solution that I think we want. So, Jenkos and Disco, I think they've been trying in their own capacity, doing well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Masah. Mr. Victor, just your final thoughts. Your final thoughts. I wanted to hear from you, for example. There's also been this discussion that maybe what we should do, do you understand, is to identify our biggest consuming cities. So you take a Lagos, you take a Port Harcourt, you take a Kano, you take those big areas, and they will be responsible for their entire generation distribution and everything. Rather than tying them into a national grid, that then causes all these losses that you've been talking about before. We generate in Kanji or in Sapele, or and then we transmit everything to. Is this something that we also need to think about?
Um, it's yes, it's possible, but it also requires some level of investment because today the way the network is structured towards distributing through the national grid.
National grid,
So
I
if you want
see.
to, yeah, if you want to bypass the grid, you need to build a whole new infrastructure to do that. Then the second question is, where do you have these power stations? Are these power stations close to where you have these big cities? And the answer, apart from Lagos, egg farm in River State for Port
Correct.
Harcourt, the answer is no. There is no big power station in Kanu. There is no big power station around the Abuja area.
Areas.
So that may not in itself be a solution. The previous question you asked to Elliot about the Mambila Plateau investment.
Correct.
My question is, why is government still investing in building power plants? The government should completely take its hands out and allow it to be market driven.
Market
And
driven.
one possible, one possible solution to the problem today is we have renewables. Okay, yes, Nigeria is in the tropics. We don't have so much wind. We don't have so much sunlight except maybe in the north. But even with the amount of sunlight we have, we can still do solar power. But
Correct.
the thing is today, the policy for renewables does not allow you to have grid tie inverters. So if you have a rooftop solar on your
house,
you cannot tie that your solar, yes, to the grid. So what the policy allows today for grid tie is where you have a solar plant that is above 1 megawatt or below 10 megawatts. That is the policy today. But it has not worked. I don't know of any solar plant that is currently tied.
No, I'm saying, why is that though? Because
okay, so two things.
Everybody does it in the world. In the UK, if I'm generating more than I need in my house, I'll sell it back to the grid. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because mainly the grid too is not stable, because you need to have the grid always on, for you to have the grid tight thing to work. But it's a very interesting solution for us. Imagine the number of homes we have. Everybody has a solar system on its roof. When you have any excess power, you sell it to the grid. Then at night, when you require the power,
you take it back.
You take it back.
Correct.
So the the grid now acts as a storage for you. Today, renewable systems are very expensive because of batteries. The battery is the most expensive component. The solar panels are now very cheap. Inverter, so you have your power. Any excess power you have needs to be stored somewhere. So a very quick solution for us would be to put it on the grid, and later at night when you need power, you come back. Even if you're lower price, for what you supply to the grid, it's still better than wasting the, I take Lagos as an example.
Yeah.
On the surface, you can generate 1,400 watts for 400 kilowatts in 1 year if you have a solar panel, okay? But in 1 year, depending on the efficiency of the solar panel, because today the technology is maybe 18, 19, 20,
20 years old, yeah.
24%. Yeah, is the highest efficiency you have. So get maybe 20% of 1,004. So that's like 70 or something like that,
yeah.
you know, in a year. So, but it's actually available. The technology is improving. Every day we're getting more efficient solar panels. So criticize them, or even the distribution companies, you could criticize them that they've not met up to expectations. When they've had all these shortfalls.
Your point, Victor, being that at least the government was supposed to invest, do some preliminary investment as part of selling off to the discos and the gencos at the beginning, and government needs to cover their own end of that deal for us to be able to get the best out of this power situation for the people of Nigeria. So, gentlemen, Ikus, you were going to say one final word before we go. Thank you very much. Please, Ikus, go ahead. Wrap up for us, please.
For me, I think the kind of solutions that we need right now is not the same way where you want to install a power generation plant, you do your own feasibility, you pre-development at your own cost, and you now go and negotiate with the government. This is what I want to do. You negotiate for a license, and it takes you a whole lot of time before you now set up. I think if we have a different approach where the government does its own analysis, its own load analysis and demand analysis, and says, okay, for this area, this is the load demand, and this is the expected growth rate for that area, you know, A, B, C, D. We have all these details, and we said, okay, we expect that by 2023, we're going to need a 200 megawatts in this place by 2021. So at that point in time, they would have done all the analysis, all the pre-development studies, and they'll have all the data. They will not throw it up to interested companies to say, okay, we want a power plant at this place for these specifications and A, B, C, D. They want different people who come and bid for it, either local investors or foreign investors and all of it. So when they bid for it, it's going to be very, very competitive. It's not going to be like when you are doing a direct negotiation with government that you want to build a power plant, and everything depends on how the negotiation turns out. But in this case, it will now be like a competitive bid amongst competing companies who have the technology, who have the resources to put those things in place. So it's not going to be it's going to be for the person with the lowest price, lowest cost, and then the best technology. So we can scale that all over the country at no additional cost. Instead of every time we want to build a power station, government is running around looking for money to invest. There was no money to invest, trying to borrow here. If we do that kind of approach where people come and bid for what you have already planned to be executed in a particular time, then we're going to save a whole lot of money, a whole lot of time, and we're going to roll out. For the distribution companies, I think the areas, their catchment areas, I think it's quite big for them, and that is why somehow they are not able to operate very efficient. I think there should be a situation where they can outsource or
Or
franchise some
break
of
it
their
further down.
further down, yeah, so that it now becomes closer to the people. And as they break it further down, they will still give other people, other investors, the opportunity to say, okay,
Opportunity to come
now
in.
now there's a different distribution company covering this state. If you can generate for us, whatever that means, whether renewable or fossil fuel or whatever, if you can generate for us at this price, we'll take up from it and we'll distribute within this state. That will now be a manageable block by another group of investors who will be able to man that state within their own capacity. Unlike where a disco is covering over 3, 4, 5 states, they have financial challenge, they have human capacity challenge, they have technology challenge and all of that. So I think if we shift our ways of implementing and managing this project, we're going to have a different solution.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you. I really want to thank you. I've had a fantastic time. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from listening to you gentlemen today. I hope that our listeners also can pick a lot from this discussion. Thank you for all of this. What we will do is we'll put this online and we'll take the feedback from the people, and hopefully we'll continue to do a little more. We will come back to you in the future. This challenge is going on for 30 weeks. We're only on week 10. So in the future, we might come back to you for other packages. Please, we will be looking forward to your support as we continue on this Can You Fix Nigeria challenge. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Thank you.